Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jana Overstreet, the Executive Director of the Lifelong Learning Academy, and I want to welcome you here to this program. You know, we have taught over 300 subjects in the last year, and not a one of them was related to philanthropy, even though we know that all of us want to leave a legacy of some sort, and all of us will leave a legacy. We will leave a legacy through our work, maybe through our money, but we certainly will leave a legacy. So I thought, you know, yes, I think this is an issue that is important to the learners in the academy and to people in general. So we got together with Dennis Stover, and come to find out, I didn't know it, but the person who had contacted me is a big philanthropist in town. I only knew him as an academy student, and his name is Harry Leopold. So it was a great idea. We worked along with our friend Dennis and made it happen. But that's not really how it really works out, is it? How it really works out is people like Mark Keller and Sheila Reed and Ruth Lando work very, very hard to make something like this come together. And so I would like us all to give them a round of applause. Thanks. At the Academy, one of the cornerstones of the Academy is that it's a place that feels safe and that you can get information and you can ask questions without ever having to be concerned about what it is that you're saying. And in that same vein, what we have done tonight is we've made this a safe place. This is a no solicitation event. No one is supposed to ask you who you're giving to or how much money you have or whether you'd like to give to their cause. We have development officers here. We have people from different not-for-profits who have signed up, but they're here for the exact same reason you are, to learn about the joy of giving, and that's it. So please be assured that you're safe here at the Academy. Ms. Kelly Lavin is our moderator for this series. She is the Executive Vice President of Sarasota Magazine and Biz 941. She has more than 25 years of experience at regional and national publications such as the Texas Monthly, Vogue, Metropolitan Home, and others. She has created marketing and branding campaigns for companies such as Procter & Gamble, Johnson & Johnson, Kraft, and Colgate. She operated her own marketing consulting company specializing in custom publishing with Walmart as her major client. She was born in Tucson, Arizona, where her father was a cattle rancher, and her husband have lived here in Sarasota for the past 15 years. She serves on the boards of the Library Foundation of Sarasota County and Neuro Challenge, a Parkinson's support group. Please welcome our series moderator, Kelly Lavin.
Thank you. My role as moderator and host is not quite as flashy as Jimmy Fallon's. As you can see, I don't have a backup band, but Harry and Dennis, I'd like you to work on that for me. Next, okay, yeah. My role is to make sure that each and every one of you leave this course not only with a passion for giving, but with the tools to do so. My role is also to introduce you to people that every one of us should know, people we can learn from, and people who make this series possible. And so I'd like to introduce you first to Dr. Sandra Stone, who is named Regional Chancellor of University of South Florida, Sarasota Manatee this past October. Dr. Stone joined USF from Dalton State College in Georgia, where she was Vice President for Academic Affairs. Part of the University of Georgia since 1996, Dr. Stone brings with her extensive experience in higher education administration, economic and workplace development, student retention, and change initiatives. She's also earned a reputation for openness, candor, and humor, which I am sure she will put to good use here. She holds bachelor's degrees in sociology and psychology, master's degree in psychology, a doctorate in sociology from Emory University, a postdoctoral certificate, God, you just go on and on here, in organizational behavior from Tulane, and a certified mediator, and is a certified mediator, skills I also know she'll put to good use here in the community. Her research and teaching interests are largely in the areas of juvenile delinquency and justice, gangs, family violence, women in the criminal justice system, program evaluation, and public policy. She credits her time working in hospitals, nursing homes, child protective services, and a battered women's shelter as formative years in both her professional and personal life. My pleasure to introduce you to Dr. Sandra Stone.
I'm also short. Thank you very much. Thank you all for attending this inaugural event in the Discover the Joy of Giving series conceived by local philanthropist Harry Leopold. Harry, would you stand and let us just say thank you? Where are you? This joint program hosted by USFSM and the Lifelong Learning Academy is one of the many ways we partner to provide informative learning and social opportunities on our campus for our larger community of learners. We truly believe our mission as a public university is to be a place where learning continues after you complete your degree. So I still get to go to school. It's great. With the stellar lineup of speakers in the Discover the Joy of Giving series, we're excited to kick things off, starting tonight with Tracy Gray, followed by 5 delightful sessions that also include time to reflect and socialize after each presentation. Tonight's reception will be held at the lovely Powell Crossley Estate on the bayfront adjoining our campus, and we hope you all will continue and join us there. USF Sarasota Manatee has had a great partnership with the Lifelong Learning Academy since before they were officially formed in 1998. Lifelong learners have become an integral part of our campus life and continue to be a rewarding partnership as we continue to build our programs on our beautiful campus. Please enjoy the speakers and be sure to find other ways to connect with our campus as we prepare to celebrate our 40th anniversary in the Sarasota Manatee community this year. We invite you to come celebrate with us at one of our special events being planned for later on in the year and for which you will be receiving information when we get a calendar together. We're also in the beginning stages of a new strategic plan, which will provide many opportunities for you to voice your thoughts and ideas about our campus, and we welcome your input. So thank you again for attending. I will close by saying, as I've thought about this series and the whole issue of giving, I'm reminded of a quote by Khalil Gibran that says, "You give but little when you give of your possessions. It is when you give of yourself that you truly give." I would just like to ask us all to keep in mind that sometimes the most valuable gift is our time and our care, which can and often does transform lives. I hope you enjoy the program, and I hope to see you all back on campus soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Stone. It's fitting to follow Dr. Stone, who I mentioned has her doctorate in sociology, with some comments from another scholar who studied American society and culture, Alex Tocqueville. I'm having a hard time. Tocqueville, sorry. Only 26 when he came to the U.S. in 1831, he traveled extensively, informed and passed on great observations of the young nation. Though we only spent 9 months here, Tocqueville gleaned an insightful view of American society. His observations, his readings, and discussions with eminent Americans form the basis of his book, Democracy in America, a detailed look at American society and politics. And it's so important that the National Endowment of the Arts wrote, "This great book remains arguably one of the 2 most important books on American social and political life." The other one they named, the Federalist Papers. Tocqueville recognized and applauded and immortalized Americans' voluntary action on behalf of the common good. and again, written in 1831. He compared what he saw, the common man reaching out to help others less fortunate, not waiting for the government or the local noblemen, so think of Downton Abbey when you think of the local noblemen, to solve the problems. He wrote, "I must say that I've seen Americans make a great deal of real sacrifices to the public welfare and have noticed hundreds of instances in which they hardly ever fail to lend faithful welfare and support to one another." His observation on philanthropy, made in 1831, is true today. Americans understand that advancing the common good means creating opportunities for a better life for all. Tocqueville commented on the propensity of Americans to form groups and associations to forward an opinion or an idea. He said, "In the United States, as soon as several inhabitants have taken an opinion or an idea they wish to promote in society, they seek each other out and unite together once they have made contact." He stated that Americans group together to hold fetes, to raise funds, sounds like Sarasota, construct churches, distribute books. They establish hospitals, schools by the same method. Finally, if they wish to highlight a truth or develop an opinion by the encouragement of great example, they form an association. Or in Sarasota, Manatee, in my words, they form a nonprofit. It's unlikely that Tocqueville could have even begun to predict the enormous growth of the number of nonprofits here in the U.S., and there's an estimated 1.5 million nonprofits in the U.S. today. The Chronicle of Philanthropy reports that $335 billion were given in 2013 alone. What is most significant about this amazing number is that it didn't come from corporations or businesses, but almost 90% of it was given by individuals, their families, and their family foundations, people just like you who have taken the time to attend today. With 1.5 nonprofits in the U.S. and an estimated 3,000 here in Sarasota, Manatee alone, and that is accounting for religious institutions, how does one even begin to understand how to make a difference, where to place your dollars and your time? And that's why we're so fortunate to have Tracy Gary and thankful to have Tracy Gary today. Tracy's book, and I have to tell you, this is my copy. And I have to tell you, this is the most insightful, most concise, clearly written. It is such a gift. I hope all of you picked yours up outside. But again, this has just become my Bible because it is so well written. Tracy's life has been dedicated to serve others and to work for the public good. Over the last 30 years, she's helped to start 23 nonprofits working for social change. She spends an average of 200 days a year traveling, giving keynotes, workshops. She told me, I think you said, that you've worked with 70 of the community foundations, I believe, in the country. She's traveled to many, many countries. She grew up in a family of privilege. Her mother, a successful Wall Street broker, was a Pillsbury heiress. Her adoptive father's family held the patent to the dial telephone. And all of us here, I have to say, we all know what that is, the dial. Together, through business ventures, they made tens of millions of dollars, all the while teaching their daughter to be a servant leader. Tracy began volunteering at 6, and by 18, she founded 2 nonprofits. Her life's work has been framed by her parents' message to her as a child. You are part of a community. You contribute to that community. This is how you will best grow yourself, by being connected to people. Please welcome Tracy Gary.
Thank you very much, Kelly. And it's rare that you have someone introduce you that actually has read your book fully. And I just want to say, I know you're extremely busy, so we love how thorough you are, and we also so appreciate your contributions in the community, which I know are extensive. I could spend an equal amount of time introducing Kelly to you, but I know that she is known by many of you, and how lucky we are to really have her in the position that she's in, and why you can imagine how many magazines have people that don't really care about their nonprofit sector as you do, so we applaud you. I was asked to remind you all to turn off your cell phones. An appropriate comment from someone who spent most of their life living off the largesse of the telephone company. So if you don't mind, we want to make sure you do that. And also, Dr. Stone, thank you so much for modeling lifelong learning itself, and may we all continue. So I'm very, very especially honored to be with you during this time, because here we are at the beginning of the year, and so often there is donor fatigue for the first 3 weeks of January, because so many people, over 40% of Americans, give in November and December. In fact, many of us are found post-dating checks on January 4th or 5th, because we go, whoops, I forgot to give, and we put that little 1231 in because we had a good year financially for some of us, and so we decide we want to do yet one more check. And there's a big push at the end of the year. All our emails and phone and increasingly our mailboxes. Of course, if you're a snowbird, you're getting double the mail. And how many of you are snowbirds? I'm just curious. Identify yourselves. We won't make a list, I promise you, but I'm just curious. So how great that you are part of another community also, at least one other. And then you like to come here and hide out, but you're not allowed to do that. The great thing is this is a thriving, vibrant, amazing community that has lots going on. So it's my honor to give you a little bit about both history. I want to expand sort of how I got here, because you don't just pop out of the womb caring about your community. I was my passion for philanthropy, my joy of giving, was shaped by the people that I met, the people who raised me, and also obviously people I've met along the way, including, I'm sure, many people in this community. I will say this is probably the third time I've been here. I have parents-in-law who used to live in Longboat Keys, and so we had occasion to come down here and enjoy the arts like anyone else. And so how lucky we all are to have this amazing community that cares so deeply about the arts, when the rest of the country has sort of forgotten the arts a great deal. But what happened in the downturn of the economy is that people couldn't go on big vacations. What they could do is support their local arts, and we did, and it kept our spirits feeling hopeful and alive. And of course, you all know that. You support your communities in all kinds of ways. But it's also a different moment in history right now. We've had, there's a lot going on that makes us very anxious, it makes us worried, it makes us concerned, the political issues that are going on. If you watch television, you can be pretty miserable about the state of the world right now, right? At the same time, we've had new elections, we have enormous inequities always in the country, and so the environment concerns us. We're all worried about all kinds of things. Your families are overwhelming. So we're here to actually give you the sense of hope and joy that comes from giving. And there are studies now all over the world, if I say nothing else to you, remember this, that actually people who volunteer and people who give live longer and are happier. It's just all over the place. It's known. So the people who volunteer, and I think for those of you who may be new to retiring or semi-retiring, we all go, oh, this is so great, I'm going to get to give back. And then you get totally overwhelmed by the number of nonprofits, 3,000 in this region, all of whom want you to be on, as well as some of the national ones, your schools and other places where you used to live or you're still living. So it can be really a challenge to choose, right? So a framing question that I use now that may be useful to you, and I'm going to give you as many tools as I possibly can in this half hour before we get to questions, is what am I uniquely called to do right now? What am I uniquely called to do right now? Because we all have our experience, we have our faith traditions or not. Some of you are agnostic or you're atheist, but you have things you believe in. And we have also sort of calls. Sometimes something happens in our families where suddenly, or if it happens in our life, we go through a divorce, we go through a transition of some kind, we go through a move, where we think, I need to be doing, I'm called as a grandparent or a godparent, or I really need to step up for this friend who's really having a rough time. Or you go through your own health crisis and you suddenly realize, wow, autism is really on the rise, or I need to step into this issue. Could be, any number of issues that we're all facing in terms of health issues. And so this whole piece of what are you uniquely called to do right now? And I think this is a time when it's good. I think many of us who are in relationships, are used to planning together. or we want our families to plan together. But let's start with you. This is you're here. You may be here with a partner, a friend, spouse, but I think the important thing of what are you uniquely called to do right now? And that relates to your giving, but it also relates to your volunteering. And it relates to you seeing yourself slightly differently, and this was a wake-up for me. I was taught, actually out of an old wealth family, that it was extremely important to redistribute our wealth and power. Now, we were not socialists. We were told that we had more wealth and power and privilege than was needed, and that other people needed that access. And I didn't have radical parents. I had parents who were pretty wise, traveled a lot, saw the world, and also lived in varied communities and understood that people were different and people had different resources. And what they taught us as a family, there were 4 kids, was that everyone, you know, sort of like whoever that higher power guy, the big man in the sky or the angel in the sky or some other force or source, gives every creature a defense system. Isn't that amazing when you think about animals and their defense systems? It's just incredible, right? It's sort of like animals hiding and migration and all these things that protect us, right? And we have them. When we really want to protect ourselves, we know how to. But also, somebody hands out this other piece, which is what we uniquely could consider our call, or what it is that we, at this point, might do, and what are our resources. So we're all resourceful men and women. Now, I could also have this room be a room full of incarcerated men and women, a group of immigrants who are new to coming to Florida or to another country. I could go to Cuba, I could go to anywhere in the world and actually say, what is your resourcefulness? And you know what? They would all be able to give me a list of what their resourcefulness is. Money might not be on it in the same way that it might be on yours. And all of you, I can tell you what 95% of you are saying. I'm not rich, don't think I'm rich. I'm not as rich as that other person. I don't even have wealth. I don't even call myself wealthy. And this is not a seminar for people who are wealthy. But we are actually probably in the top 5% of the world, every one of us in this room. Right? We're resourceful. We're resourceful in lots of ways. So resourcefulness is also about our creativity. Resourcefulness is also about our connectivity. You know, how many of us know some kid or a really close friend of ours, grandson or granddaughter, who's desperately trying to find a job, and we're like hustling to try to get them contacts, right, or doing what we can. So that's our resourcefulness too. And you have other resourcefulness, your creativity. You know, Harry coming up with this idea, and that student who came up with the idea, then manifesting it. You know, our resourcefulness is about lots and lots of different things, right? And so to know how are you uniquely resourceful now, because, you know, my resourcefulness looks really different as a 63-year-old than it did as a 22-year-old, right? Different energy, different networks. So there are pluses and minuses to all that, different capacity to do different things, and so knowing what the upside and the downside is. So if I leave you with nothing else but knowing that every person you meet has their own resourcefulness and is given that resourcefulness. So my parents gave me the great gift of curiosity. Who is this person? What is this organization? What is their dream? And what do they bring to the table in terms of resourcefulness that I might be able to work with, or that we might be able to collaborate and do something together? That's all. Now there's lots and lots of other things, and so the journey has been very, very rich for me, because it's sort of getting curious about somebody else's story or their capacity. So that led me actually to, you know, thinking through things a little bit, and I decided to go to a school where I would actually be taught by different storytellers. So one of the people that I studied with was a guy named Joseph Campbell, and he studied at Sarah Lawrence College, and for 2 years I studied with Joseph Campbell, because he was all about mythology and the stories that cultures came up with. And then he said, you know, you really, given your background, I'll tell you something about that, you know, you really also need to understand anthropology. So why don't you study with this guy named Claude Lévi-Strauss in Paris? He's only there for another year. And I said, that sounds like a really good idea. I don't know how I can get over there. But I figured out how to get there and studied also all about the differences in class and race and culture. So I've actually spent 40 adult years and another 5 years before that, you know, in college and in high school, even in my senior year, really interested in culture. And that came out of one really lucky thing that happened to me. My family was rich in the 50s and 60s, $30 million, 5 houses, helicopter, plane, yellow Rolls Royce. They enjoyed it. And they were pretty crazy, alcoholic, violent, a lot of other issues. Neither of my parents are alive. I wouldn't be telling you that's part of the story. But they were incredibly generous and wild and adventuresome and all kinds of stories that I could tell you, but I won't. But what they did do is they showed up for several conversations: money, sex, power, and religion. Oh yes, and politics. Because they thought you're going to sit next to a lot of people in your life and make sure you can talk for 5 minutes at least on those subjects: money, sex, power, religion, politics. So we're not going to talk about most of them, but we are going to talk a little about money, okay? Because I think this whole thing of getting fluent on those subjects. So there were life lessons, and the lesson on money that I got mostly was money comes and goes. They were depression babies. How many of you grew up with parents who really were anxious about money most of your life? Okay? And how many of you would say that you would put yourself on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being quite anxious about money? Raise your hand if you actually feel like you're still in that place of feeling anxious about money. Raise your hand. No, I'm impressed, okay? Because usually in a room like this there are more people than that. So we are blessed, right? We do get that we don't have to worry quite as much as they did. If I was to say how many of you are in 3s or 4s, you do worry, right? Raise your hand if you're a 3 or 4, right? So it's more. But there's some of you that actually have achieved a place in life where you realize there's lots of things to worry about. But human security is many different things to you. It's not only money. It's about your resourcefulness, and you know you'd make it, right? Or you've gotten this far. So I think this piece of how does giving and philanthropy, a lot of people don't like the word philanthropy, but how does giving back really enhance our lives? And how, given the moment in history that we're in, where a lot of people would say, hey, this form of capitalism and democracy. So let's go back there for a second. Capitalism and democracy. We have a system of governance which means that a thriving democracy is about the strength of our government, it's the strength of our business sector, corporate sector, and it's the strength of our nonprofit sector. And de Tocqueville, and Kelly, thank you for mentioning de Tocqueville. De Tocqueville really said it, you know, wow, something distinguishes this country. If you actually go to other countries, they really have higher taxation, almost all of them, and their governments are providing education and lots of different things, medical care 100% in most cases, and some cases, as we know, in Cuba and other places, almost everything. And this thriving sector of giving back and helping each other doesn't really exist. So one of the things that happened is just to look at the history a little bit is, okay, when we were at our best, what's really been going on? And de Tocqueville describes it, that getting out and really volunteering and really helping each other, or when something happens, you see somebody drops something, you stop and you go help them. I mean, just sort of basic human instinct, right, to reach out. We weren't afraid, but this form, what's happened with television, I think, a lot, and violent movies, and the stories that we hear of kind of hard things happening is we've gotten quite a bit less interactive with each other, and I notice that people don't help each other as much. If you grew up in New York as I did, people can die on the street and nobody reaches out to help you. But if you're in a small community and somebody drops something, or you see that they're in trouble, or somebody asks for help, we want to reach out because we're a small web. It's a web of 350,000 people, or maybe a web of, I understand that it doubles actually this time of year, that your population doubles, right? Or if you take the Manatee, the counties around you, you go from 600,000 or 700,000 to over a million this time of year. So the roads, yes, are busy, but more than that, more people also come here, and so there's more things we could do if we got them engaged, right? So this isn't just a place of vacation, this is a place to actually practice, our democracy and our caring about each other. So that, to me, is the promise of democracy. The promise of democracy is really lifting as we climb, helping other people, getting that next generation involved in doing what we can. So in the spirit of the money messages, money comes and goes, We expect you to give back. And a giving account was set up for myself when I was the youngest, so I was 14. My brothers and sisters also got one when they were 14. And it was also, here's $100. We want to know, actually, you have to remember that that was in the 60s. In the 14, I think I was, yeah, it was just in the 60s, mid-60s. They wanted to know where we actually wanted to give the money, and to also at Thanksgiving to say they didn't want us to know where all the money had gone. They just wanted for us to tell the story of what the best gift was that we made and why, and where we learned the most. So it might have been that in today's language that if one of my godkids had made a decision to give the money to a tattoo parlor, they might have said what my biggest learning experience was that was not such a good idea, or whatever. You know, it didn't always have to be an upbeat story, right? It was a lesson learned. So I love my parents for encouraging us and not requiring us to hand the whole list in. I thought that was sort of an independence that I appreciated early on. But we were also given this message, and that is, we expect you to give back. You're going to get actually $1 million when you're 21. We're preparing you for that because we want you to be independent. We also want you to put most of that money, if not all, back into the community by the time you're 35. In the form of a business, you can give it away, but be mindful about where you're giving it because you also have to keep supporting yourself. Or you could, you could leverage it somehow. So these concepts at age 14 were something I didn't really know how to think about it. I didn't even know what $1 million was, and it took me a long time to learn what that was going to really mean. But they said, we expect you to start volunteering with this giving account, which those of you who have grandchildren, it's a great thing to do, or godchildren, or not too late with your own kids. Set up a giving account or a family account, maybe at the community foundation, where you could actually begin to give collectively, right? So they also said, we want you to start volunteering 5 hours a week. I'd been volunteering for earlier, but then they put parameters. Every week, even when we're not traveling, here's a form, you got to send in this, give this form, and if you miss it, then there's consequences, right? So consequences, what a concept. In today's, there's a different style of parenting has set in, hasn't it? So the whole thing of consequences was real in our family, and also by age 16 every summer we were expected to work for pay, get your job. We're going to teach you how to type. We're going to teach you how to actually have a resume by the time you're 16. So you better have something to put on it. 10 hours a week, because we are going to send you to college if you get at least a B in high school, which is mandatory, or you don't get to do X, Y, and Z. And we want you to pay for 10% of college, which was $2,000. I had to earn that money from 16 to 18, a year. So there was no sitting around in our house. We were in these different communities, and it was a powerful thing. But there was one additional thing that really made it a very, very rich experience for me. We lived actually part of the time in Florida. My family had houses in New York and Florida, Minnesota and Wisconsin, and Paris. So the Florida house was on Indian Creek Island, a very exclusive little island off Miami. And we were cared for by, for the most part, my parents were gone for a month or two at a time. My brother went to school when he was in the 3rd grade. All my older siblings went when they were, for the most part, in the 8th grade. So I was the youngest and home quite a bit. And who raised me was the African-American Hispanic caregivers who were with my family, and the gardeners. And whether we were here or in New York or Florida, Minnesota, there were 35 people who worked in those different houses all together. So they were my family. And they were the teachers for me of what else was going on in the world. And I listened to Dr. King on their beds, and I went to church with them and did a whole lot of different things which gave me a different view of what the world was like. And some of you may know the experience I'm talking about from a different perspective. Some of you may have lost your parents actually as caregivers to other white families. I want to really honor those differences. But for me, these are the people who loved me into being and made me feel that it was not that I had an obligation to do something different, but that there was a world out there that needed me to do something different. And I got exposed to it, which was really a blessing. And without going into the story that I told at lunch today, I did have a 3rd grade teacher who asked me how much my family made. And it sort of changed everything, because I interviewed my parents and I interviewed the domestic workers. And as soon as I understood at age 9 what those differences were, I've been impossible ever since. Actually, I've been promoting social and economic justice ever since because I thought that kind of inequity just shouldn't be. And it's actually greater now than it was. So let's look at some of the people who actually really were instrumental in trying to change that. So we know about Carnegie, and I want to turn to Kelly, who has a dream that she shared at lunch, which is she'd like all the libraries in the area to stay open on Sundays. And one of the people that put libraries all over this country was Andrew Carnegie. So the robber barons in the 80s, in 1880s, there was no taxation, and they began to feel that they needed to do something for society, which was good, a very, very small handful of them. And Andrew Carnegie was one of them, and so he began to establish libraries, right? He took one himself, got architecture plans and, put hundreds of libraries all over this country that still are here today. Beautiful, beautiful contribution to our society. He did that himself. And then we got, a little later, Rockefeller. Well, and the evolution of philanthropy, Rockefeller and Madam C.J. Walker, an African-American woman in Chicago, should be mentioned in this right as well. Business people who were very busy, sort of the way Gates was. Bill Gates for a long time was like, philanthropy, somebody else in my family do it. Dad, take this over. I'm busy, still doing what I can at Microsoft, right? And then what happened is that Rockefeller sent his advisors out, and Madam C.J. Walker, she's sort of an amazing history. She had a hair straightening business in Chicago and is seen driving in these beautiful cars, an old Ford, and she had a fleet of women who actually went and did sales. They'd go door to door and knock on doors, especially to new people that lived in Chicago. And they went to other cities eventually as well. They were there to sell a hair straightening product. But really what they were there to do, and she trained them, was to be social workers. Welcome to the community. I have a small business, but I'm here to actually support you to find the resources you need. Do you or your family need any resources? I know all the nonprofits in the region. I know where all the churches are. And if you'll allow me in to sit for a few minutes, I'm more than happy to talk with you about how you can have a stronger community and be part of ours. And by gum, she was the first woman in the United States to make $1 million in her own right, African-American woman hair straightening product. Why? Because she provided a service that was needed, and she had a fleet of women who provided caring information in a very personal way. So that evolution of the philanthropist doing it himself to having an advisor and a group of people who go out in the community do it for you in the 1890s, turn of the century. And then in the 19-teens, about 1911 in most cases, Kansas City and a number of other places created the community foundations. And then we had the United Ways also, right? They were called community chests. You remember those? And then it was sort of, community-based. We're going to take a group of people from the local communities who know what's needed in their communities, put them in charge of figuring out where the money should go. So that's an evolution from one person having the power to a group of people making the decisions. Actually, all the people who made the decisions for Madam Walker were her sales fleet. It's a little like having an employee matching program. Okay, so I'm going to fast forward today. So we've had an evolution now there are now 800 community foundations all over the country, like Saratoga or Manatee Foundation. There are 150 women's foundations. There's social justice foundations. There's a new African-American giving circle happening through the community foundation. There are gay and lesbian funds. There are Hispanic funds. There are all kinds of different sort of special interest funds, right? And they've all flourished because this idea of communities figuring out what needs to happen is actually a good idea. That local people know their communities or people who are focused on a particular issue. Sometimes a giving circle on the environment or the Jewish giving circle or name it. There are lots and lots of different kinds of giving circles. So how we give has become really important, and sometimes who we give with is equally important. So I'm going to show you a few slides right now, but I think this idea of the evolution of giving, okay, what does that have to do with you? Many of you volunteer, so let's do a show of hands. How many of you are actively volunteering right now? And look around the room as we raise this, okay? Look at this room, it's probably 90% of you. So I just want to thank you so much for your volunteer time and say this is really what makes our country happen, and hopefully it's the right position for you. I don't know how many of you are looking for new positions because you feel like I'm getting a little tired doing that, I'm not necessarily learning something new. Very important to speak up and let those organizations know that you want to learn something new. How many of you have been on nonprofit boards? Let's raise hands here. So that's also 50% or 60% of you. Tough work, right? Increasingly harder and harder work because we have a lot of turnover, the executive directors and others. So what we want to do is to get into some of the giving tools and what really makes a difference between you becoming somebody who suddenly there's 1,500,000 or 1 million, including religious and spiritual organizations, 1,800,000 nonprofits. How do you choose, right? How do we figure this out? So I'm going to go to some of the, I love this drawing because I thought it was such a, it doesn't have everything. Some of the issues I know this is small for some of you, I apologize. But it's kind of a great drawing. It came from the people that run the Catalog for Giving out of Boston. And their attempt to kind of say, okay, this is the tree of life. How do we actually choose? And so we're going to try to narrow this down so that by the time in the next few minutes, we'll get to, really your questions and answers. But I want to spend 15 or 20 minutes going somewhere over the tools. Now, Harry has very generously provided these books. And I do have others. There are a few additional for sale. But I just want to say that there's a website and there's a CD-ROM in here. It has exercises on how do you create a giving plan or a legacy plan. So I'm just going to give you all a few things. And we'll go back and forth now that I've had a little chance to talk story with you. We'll go back and forth here to some of the other handouts and a little bit of a PowerPoint that I have. So bear with me here because I'm a Mac person, not a... We're going to do this hopefully the right way. See if I can get it. Here we go. From the beginning. There we go. Okay, so a lot of this we can pass over because we've already been there. So this gives you the bio. So the role of nonprofits in society, I think, is to give us a sense of hope through really creating connection. And I think we do really get that sense of hope through our engagement in volunteerism. It's also a way to redistribute wealth and power and to make sure that we're either taxing people fairly or really we're asking people to have an incentive to create jobs in the nonprofit sector as well. It also reduces isolation and increases our influence and connectivity while teaching empathy. So there's sort of a rash of narcissism happening. Me, right? This creative tension in our democracy that's really about our rights versus our collective needs, right? And so this thing, what is narcissism? Narcissism is the absence of empathy because we're so focused on our own needs, right? A lot of times deprived kids, poor or rich, people who've been in violent situations. I mean, there's a lot of, I have to hold on to my own power and control when people have lost control, right? So we understand that, but what heals that is actually empathy. So empathy is about learning what other people need and listening and hearing their stories. So you can imagine for me, a trained narcissist, by a group of trained narcissists, to actually go out into community and hear people's stories, absolutely cracked open my heart. I got problems. My problems are nothing relative to some of these other folks' problems. So it's like they're real, but guess what? Let's listen to what the whole of the problem is and then see what we can do. I'm resourceful, they're resourceful. Nobody's pitying anybody. We're all just trying to come up with solutions and opportunities, right? So in the best of cases, that's kind of where we are and wanting to make sure that we're really thinking through this kind of next thing. So I want to start with values, and there is a handout that you have in your packet. On the left side, let's see, is it on the right or the left side? There's some black and white sheets. I think it's on the left side. You'll see some black and white sheets. Now these are exercises that are in the book, but they also are downloadable from the website. Some of you are not into all that, so I wanted to just give you a few. This is a fun thing to do with your family, which is choose your top 3 values or 5 values and then narrow them. Then on the flip side, you'll sort of choose some issue areas. Well, now we're looking at this word called intersectionality, which is sometimes you don't just want to fund something like, like the libraries. It might be that literacy is a much bigger issue, that it's not just about keeping the libraries open. Kelly, how would you frame actually your interest and your concerns about why keeping the library open on a Sunday? Would that be literacy or would that be?
Impacts, literacy impacts interaction with your community, impacts history, learning.
Right.
So it's like putting a stone into water. It resonates, it ripples. So it just isn't about the Sunday. It's about having access.
So it's about having access to education, ripple for many of you that couldn't heard. So if you had to put a category, it's multiple categories. It's education, it's building community, it's also democracy. The libraries are the one place that anyone can go. You can go to a library. You can't take a book out without getting a little card, but the reality is everyone is welcomed at the libraries. You know, everyone is welcomed. They're one of the few really democratic institutions that remains in our country that really does not prevent access from anyone, unless somebody starts tearing up the books, of course. But anyway, it's a very exciting thing to think about, okay, what are the issues that I really care about? And what I notice from a lot of people is that people don't, how many of you would say right now you have a giving plan? You have a way that you do your giving? Let's have you raise your hands. Some of you have an Excel spreadsheet. So a few of you have a system. You may have a list at the community foundation. You may have, an accountant who shares it with you. How many of you would say that your giving feels kind of unfocused and chaotic? Come on, come out wherever you are. Come out wherever you are. Okay, so a third, something like that. And I just want to honor that, it's sort of like that pocket of chaos that we all have. Some people have a pocket of chaos in their car. For some people, it's the trunk of their car. For some people, it's a dedicated room. And for some people who go through the death of a parent and all that paperwork that they send us and all that stuff of being an executor and everything else, it's a floor of a house, right? It's a floor of an apartment, or we just go through times when we cannot possibly keep up. And it's like this closely held secret. And I'm just like all the rest of you. It's like, how many of you sort your tax receipts every week? Let's see who you are. Do you sort your tax receipts? Hey! Oh, I'm in good company. Oh, I feel better immediately. Okay. How many of you, it's a once-a-year event that you just struggle on, right? Okay, we struggle for 5 days before taxes. Oh my God, it's chaotic. But I'm just saying, we come in all shapes, right? So I think they cut ourselves slack that none of us can keep up. And therefore, the idea that 1.8 million nonprofits are trying to get our names and trying to solicit us, it's overwhelming. So what we want to do is focus, because if what you had, and I want you to imagine a little bit of a pie chart, because what happens is that there are sometimes, I'm going to go see if I can do this, this idea of your core values being the core of our belief, and that you have a vision of the world and that you want. So that idea of what is it that you'd like to change or preserve during your lifetime? Is there something that really bothers you about Sarasota or the nation as a whole or the world that really upsets you? So at lunch today, we had a group of people that were talking from the Community Foundation. A lot of people concerned about inequity, just feeling like this is not going the way we wanted. This is democracy. This gap is not healthy for all of us. And for other people, it's like, gee, what's going on with, religious extremism? Very upsetting, what's starting to happen, people being killed in all these ways. So whatever your issue, could be family violence. I mean, a lot of you are, we're all often have been through trauma of one kind or another. So we're healing, and part of the way we heal is sometimes giving through giving through philanthropy. You may be sure I've funded a lot of domestic violence stuff because I grew up in a family with domestic violence. And sometimes that's the very act that makes you feel better because you're helping some other families and not go through what you went through. Or so you hope, right? So I think this thing of allowing yourself, imagine you have a pie chart, like a pie, that actually says, okay, I'm going to give a third to education and literacy, a quarter to this, a quarter, whatever it is, it's your pie to divide up in the way you want to. But also to pay attention to what does the community need. So we read and we're thinking and we look for opportunities. And some people just scour the paper every day and they find things that look like is needed and they send a check, right? Or they listen on television. Other people, they ask the Community Foundation or the United Way, what are the gaps? What's really needed? And so the whole thing is, allowing yourself with your time, talent, and treasure to really think, what do I have to give and what do I want to focus on? Some of you are on boards of directors and you think, well, I'm giving my time. It doesn't make any sense for me to give my money there. And I just want to say I don't agree. I think it's really important to actually consolidate, that we're more effective if we're on a board to actually have it be one of the top 3 things we give to, so that we can say, hey, it's one of my top 3 gifts and I give my time And I really believe in this because as you go out to fundraise from others, it's much more convincing then. And for the period of time you're on that board, you know, you can really say, this is in our top 3 things that we give to, and we really believe in it. Now, that may not be possible this year because you've already got other priorities, but just allow yourselves to let yourself have the joy of that alignment. So when I know my values are this, and my topic areas are this that I'm giving to, and my time and my investments, and let's say I'm an environmentalist, and I don't want to offend anybody here, but let's say that I'm an environmentalist and I decided that actually I've noticed that our family foundation is making most of its money, this is not my case, but in oil and gas business. And meanwhile, we're giving 5% away to help the environment. But 90% of the money is actually being made in oil and gas extraction. That's a little out of alignment, shall we say, right? If we're making our money in fracking, which we're not, but if we're making our money in fracking and we're giving 5% away, the net return is we're not really helping the world in a significant way. So we have to kind of pay attention to when are we really in alignment. And what I know is when I'm aligned, when I say, this is really what I want to change and preserve, and I'm going for it, I'm going to make sure that I have more things in alignment, my volunteer time, my money, my fundraising capacity, that something else happens in me, my legacy, that I'm actually going to leave my legacy also to 2 or 3 groups that have to do with that lifetime commitment that I've had. So I just start feeling elated because I start feeling like really I'm walking my talk, right? I'm in some kind of alignment. And when I'm out of alignment, I'm sort of always an apology and always sort of not feeling like I'm quite doing it right. So it's taken me 20 years to get to that place, but I will tell you that it's a great thing to try, right? So I think that's when you want to have mission match. You have a mission or you have a something you really want to accomplish. For instance, just the formation of this series. There was a goal. There was a way that it wanted to happen. It had to be built. The speakers had to be invited. It was a dream. The organizations had to be included. There were all kinds of things. There were all kinds of pieces and steps. But then imagine how happy the sponsor is when you're sitting in the room and it's manifest, right? So that kind of joy can happen day after day after day when you have, it's like you went to a camp, you want to give that experience to some other people, you meet the campers that you support. It's a high, right, when you begin to see that work. So having a giving plan is really, a great tool. So I'm not going to actually do more right now on the giving plan, but I'm going to say something just about, see if I can get out of here and remember how to do that. Escape, here we go. How strategic is your grant making? Okay, so don't think of yourself as a grant maker, just think of yourself as a giver. So one thing that we notice is that in the United States, about 70% of Americans give. When the vote happened in last fall, it was only 36% of Americans voted. Shameful, right? No matter what you think of elections, it's kind of a sad thing, but it's great that 70% of people are giving. It used to be 80%. And the average household gives away around $2,000 a year, 2% of income. Most households are making about $50,000, so it varies how much. Okay, so this is actually in the book, and I'm going to tell you where it is so you don't have to really copy it. So on page 2, on the right-hand side, it's a better drawing, but I didn't have time to copy it. So if you look at this side, right, and you look at this side. So what's actually happening now with these 10 gifts, and I'd interviewed donors back in the 80s and 90s to get this information. So what happens is that a lot of people feel like they're giving 4 or 5 of those 10 gifts in an area called obligatory giving. So obligatory giving would be, I should be giving to my synagogue and my church or mosque, and so I feel obligated to give. Or, oh my heavens, my husband's favorite charity, my wife's favorite charity, my kid's favorite charity, my boss's favorite charity, I should be giving to the United Way, I should. And it gets really tedious, right? You start feeling like enough of these shoulds, right? So 4 or 5 of those, that's kind of hard. Social and fun. Okay, social and fun. I'm new to Sarasota, never been here. I'm totally excited to be here. I wish this was the case, actually. If I ever retire someplace, you guys win it. I'm just telling you someplace because it's a great community here. I love this place. So social and fun. New to town, don't know anybody, want to go. We've got kids. And they're having a school auction. They want us to pay $25 to come and donate 5 things. And of course, it'll be fun. I'm going to go, and we're going to pay to go, right? So that's an example of social and fun. There are tons of them. We go to events all the time, right? And we pay. And that's just part of our getting involved in organizations and having some fun. Nothing wrong with that. There's an F in philanthropy somewhere, I'm sure of it, but you know, philanthropic fun is okay. Passionate would be, okay, I think Dr. Stone is one of the great leaders of our time, or Kelly's one of the great leaders, whatever it is. A great leader comes to you. It could be like a kid, you're riding a bus one day, and you turn to this kid and you say, what's the dream you have? What's your dream, Julie? And Julie goes on, and she tells me about her dream. And lo and behold, somebody gets $250 to Julie at some point, or it could be $1,000, and says, Julie, go with your dream. You know, the fun of meeting somebody who's got a dream, who you feel like you just want to make it happen. Sometimes it happens in your own family. You got a kid who's going to start a job, a business or something. You just want to make it happen. So I have a category in our family giving that says, that's called Tracy's Whim. I get to do whatever I want with a certain amount of money just to let that happen, right? Because that part of serendipity, of meeting people and actually helping them to make things happen, is just part of the joy and the creativity of giving, right? Okay, so passionate giving is following a leader. Sometimes it's about an issue where you've really been hurt or you've had a hard time, right? And so you want to change something for somebody else, or you see, you know, your friend is dying of breast cancer, you want to contribute to something that has to do, or your brother's got AIDS, or your new grandson or daughter has autism. I mean, you know, ad nauseum, right? We've got so many different crazy things happening with our health that it's very easy to sort of be passionate about trying to turn something around, right? And then there's this issue of strategic giving. Okay, we've given 9 of our gifts away. Uh-oh, strategic giving. I really should be changing the system somehow, right? I know that just funding the battered women's shelter isn't changing violence in America, so I don't know how to go about that. How do I do that? How do I figure out the root cause? And it seems so heady. I'm not very heady. I don't know how to get there, right? So it's my opinion that actually how strategic our giving is one thing, how much fun we're having is another, how engaged we are is another. And it's like sometimes it's okay not to get to this, but I think it's really helpful if you care about that, and we care about making philanthropy feel a little more substantial, that we actually push on that a little bit more and do a little less on this model, a little fewer, one gift obligatory, keep social and fun, passionate, find the things we're more passionate about, and more strategic giving. You know, that means sometimes working collaboratively. If we had this, and I really want to encourage you to do this, to our fellow sponsors and our hosts, if everyone here in your 3rd or 4th thing identifies your issue area that you really care passionately about, and we divide you into a room where all the people who care about youth and all the people who care about the arts, that you have to choose one topic, and you begin to actually talk together before the end of the series, or you network together, I want you to stir up some trouble, you all. I want you to really talk about what's great. Maybe you could have a little Facebook page or whatever. You really begin to network with each other about people that have some of the same issues that you do, or you want to make the same change in the world, and just see what happens. Maybe you have at the reception, you just have all the people at the reception, the final reception or two, that really care about growing philanthropy in Sarasota. You know, you've already designated that as one of 5 or 7 choices. And you begin to network with each other. And I'm just saying, find your people. Find the people who want to who have the same mission and the same hope that you do, whether you're volunteering or you're giving money, and then see how you can be a learning community together. And I think that's part of what some of you are part of groups that do that. You volunteer at a place or you give to a place, but we're kind of only going to their fundraising events. Sometimes they're donor briefings. We're not doing enough ongoing work. So that's what giving circles are. That's what they're new models of ways that you can give. And I just want to encourage, even in this series, we could make that happen. So let's turn that model around if we can. And then we're going to actually look at a couple of other tools, and we're going to take your questions and answers really shortly, because I want to make sure we're getting to kind of what's useful for you. The human security umbrella, because this is harder to read. So one of the things we noted, I spent a lot of time building women's foundations because I thought, you know, women and girls need to learn more about philanthropy and about money. So there are now 200 of them. I've been very honored to work with 160 of them all over the world. And that was a 25-year piece of work that I'm very happy to say they're established now. We established the first one in 1975 and then began to build them. And there's one in Florida, 1 or 2, I think, in Florida, but in southern Florida, I don't think there's one up here yet. So this idea of, you know, when you invest in a woman, she usually invests in a, you know, if you look at the Grameen Bank, which is in India, They have little businesses that they invest in, right? And they provide capital for those businesses. And I sat next to the head of the Grameen Bank once and said, how come you switched from sort of men who had small businesses to women? And they said, oh, it was very, very simple. When the women, what we required them to do with their small businesses, and we were giving them $200 to $400 loans, is that every Friday they had to meet with a pod of 3 or 5 other businesses that were also street businesses. And they had to do their accounting with each other, and then they had to put the amount aside that they owed us, and they had to sort of talk about what worked and didn't work. And it was kind of a form, this is way back in the 80s, this was a form of accountability and support. Well, at the end, if they had something extra, they could decide what they wanted to do with the money. And when it was all men, with all due respect, the men went out and actually saw prostitutes or drank, and the women decided they were going to fix the water system or a child care system. And we just decided it was probably because they had kids and that they were actively involved with, and that they tended to think about the collective need in a broader way. Now, I'm not saying that's the case in all cases, but it was a really interesting moment in which you had to think, okay, when a woman gets money, oftentimes she builds her family, men do too, but this, what is human security? You know, we begin to really get that we can spend our lives afraid of what's going to happen on the outside, or we can keep building institutions that really are about conscious, caring, loving. I'm in the love business. I don't know about you all. This is all about loving and caring, creating loving and caring communities, right? So I just want to give you a different framework than the word security, I think, has come to, we're not going to get into this political discussion, but why do we have tanks in our local police departments and things? It's making me nervous. So what I want to say is human security to me are these things, and I think there's just a way of thinking about security differently. So I offer that to you because the women's funds have begun to get that when we invest in a woman, we invest in her family then begins to give back to their community. And when the woman is stronger, her family is stronger, the community is stronger, then investing in women is a strategy for actually improving the world. And we've come to really see that as a great form of investment as well. So the issue of steps of building, I want to get to questions. So I want to say, thinking through what the problem is you want to address, what your goals or the outcomes you want. This is kind of heady stuff, and that's why I think it's better done in a group. But if you decided, okay, next Thanksgiving, I want to figure out how to put aside money so that we could have a family conversation about giving, and just to have an interesting discussion, send everybody this values sheet and say, everybody do your own values and your own issues, and just share a little bit, and then let's do one for our family. Let's think about what we could do together that might be interesting. And it's a very fun thing to think, okay, if we each give a little bit, is there one thing we'd like to give to together? Now, some of you are going, I couldn't even get my family in the room, forget it. We've been there, tried that. But it's like, just to think, to come out of doing this individually is just another way of doing it. So I think that we need sometimes more conversations on what's really going to work. And so some of the worksheets in the book, which you'll have a chance to see, kind of give you that way of being able to do something very practically. And then lastly, I just want to couple things. One is there are worksheets that we've done that have to do with what is the difference between charity and transformational philanthropy. So charity might be, as you can see there, short-term fixes, social services, this is the column on your left, kind of reacting to things, individual responses, and creating more dependent communities. Whereas transformational philanthropy is thinking long-term and being more proactive and kind of thinking about what an organized response to something is and empowering independent and diverse communities. Let's not give, and I will say this phrase, you asked me a question and answer about it, race and class-based self-interest. If I'm African American and I only give to my church, if I'm Jewish or Muslim and I'm only giving to my religious institution, that makes sense because that's where I've grown up. But when we look at other institutions, if I care about a particular issue, I need to step out from my own class and my own race. If I'm only supporting my kid's school, am I really helping in the broadest way possible, or am I just keeping money in my own little class community? So that's why I think we have a failure. If government is not going to redistribute wealth and power, and business is actually a very small percentage, less than 4% of all philanthropy is done by businesses, then it's our individual need to actually be thinking more about what do other communities need. And this is a very, very important time for that, because we know that inequality, somehow we fell asleep on the wheel here. Something happened where inequality's just gotten to be, unnecessarily divisive. And I think that we're looking at, you don't have to agree with me about minimum wage and all that stuff, but I think we have to get that, people can't live without, there being jobs, and we haven't seen enough trickle down in terms of some of the job creation. So reviewing your recent giving and really thinking through what did you give through last year, organizations you donated to in the last couple of years, the exercises are in the books for that. Thinking about where you volunteered and, the organizations, why you gave to those organizations. Was it because a friend asked me, or because it's in my strategic bullet, or I love being involved with these people because they're so smart? Making sure that really you're thinking through the organization and if they're still strong, how do you evaluate them? And then really reflecting on what you need to do. I think we can be more strategic. It does not have to take more than a few hours to do some of these things, but I think it is a way. Now, when we get into the questions and answers, I want you to ask more questions of me of how do you choose? If I have a friend who has breast cancer and I'm really thinking about, I've got 50 organizations that actually are doing breast cancer research, how do I possibly choose? We have this problem anytime you want to go to a doctor, right? You go, 10 people have given me 10 different people's names, and we begin doing our research. But when it comes to the internet, a lot of us are like, it's just too complicated to have to do all this research, right? So in the Q&A, let's ask more questions, because some of you got solutions to that already, and sometimes I want to give everyone permission. This is not a science. This is a 280-page book on how to create a giving plan and how to create a legacy plan. It's not a science. It's actually sometimes an act of utter spontaneity and a best guess. And I, who am the researcher of all time, can tell you that the best guess, that your intuition is actually your greatest guide. That sometimes you meet someone who you just know is, you're not sure. I mean, a lot of people were fooled by Bernie Madoff's, and yes, 2% of all nonprofits have crooks, just like all businesses have a lot of crooks. But the reality is, most people in the nonprofit sector are loving, caring people who are trying to make the world a better place. They may not have much race or class analysis. They may not know much about what's going on in the broader community. They may not know how to work with volunteers. But you got to give them feedback, or they're never going to improve. And I think the whole thing of our best guess here is, are you one of the angels that's going to go in and actually improve the system, or are you going to be at home criticizing it? And my hope is that if we do nothing more in this series to get you excited about the joy of giving of your time, talent, and treasure, then we will have done something. And so it's my great honor to challenge you and to say, may you attend every one of these series and get a pearl of wisdom from each one that carries you forth, that allows you the sense of hope and possibility of what we can do. I don't know whether you have 5 more years to live, or 10 more years to live, or 20 more years to live. I don't know whether I will be hit by that bus in July tomorrow. But I know that I will have done everything in my power to stand shoulder to shoulder to create a kind of change that I want to see happen in society. And it gives me, that is where my sense of hope and sense of possibility comes from. Because I have seen nothing but caring people who want to do the same. And every once in a while I see people who are apathetic and they're grumpy and they feel like it's hopeless and they're sitting at home watching television the whole time, and I say, turn off the television and come volunteer with me. Come on, let's go see some of the youth who are really trying to make it in our society, and let's help them get going. Let's lift them and see if they can get some of their dreams happening. Because it is all possible. And where we stop and we hold ourselves back, we are stopping the possibility for someone else. So I invite you to be absolutely evangelical in the best sense of the word, about getting people excited about giving and giving back. Because I can tell you there's a lot of work to do. Let's roll up our sleeves. Let's tell other people what we're learning. You're attending this. I want you, over the next 2 weeks, between now and the next session, to tell 10 people what you learned here tonight. Just a pearl of wisdom or two, and talk it up. Because that is the way. There's a volunteer bureau here in town. There's lots of ways that you can get involved here at the university. They need volunteers. We had 20 volunteers. We had 5 women who were volunteers from the student body who came and put your packets together. There are things to do every single day. So I invite you really to do that. And here's our lovely quote from Anne Frank. How wonderful that nobody need wait a single moment before starting to improve the world. And so to think what uniquely we're going to continue to do that is really important. a giving plan or a volunteer plan or a leadership plan about how to raise money is part of the toolkit that I think we all need. It helps us be more focused, and it helps us to say no. No, I'm not interested in that issue right now. We're very focused on these other issues, and that's where we're putting our time. That allows you to a freedom to go on and to actually stay focused and to have better results. So I honor your own choices. I hope that this has been useful, and I want to make sure that we take a few minutes for questions and answers now, and then we have a very exciting additional thing that's going to happen in the last 20 minutes of our program today. So we ask everybody to sit still. If you speak, we have 2 mics. I think we have 1 or 2 mics. If we can't hear you, one of them's right here. Thank you. What's your name? Sarah. Sarah's got the mic, and she'll run around. And if you speak, I'm going to ask you to stand and say your name, and then we will go on to the next person. It may take 30 seconds to get from one side of the room to the next. If you can't hear the person speaking, raise your hand, and I'll repeat the question. I'll repeat her response or his response, okay? Sarah, who's got a good question? Here we go. This gentleman over here, John. So John, you're going to stand up. Sarah's going to get over there, and we will do what we can. Thank you.
Hello.
Oh. Hi. John Mutz is my name. I'm a snowbird from Indianapolis, Indiana. And my question is this. I couldn't agree with you more about Tocqueville's work, but it took place a long time ago. About 100 years after Tocqueville came to America, a guy named Bob Bella and a group of sociologists did another survey of America. And they wrote a book called Habits of the Heart.
Yes.
And my question for you is, now it's been, I think,
25 years.
15, 20 years since Habits of the Heart. What is, and you spent your life, it seems to me, studying this field. I'd be interested in what your view is of America today, given what it was at Tocqueville's time and at Bella's time.
Great point. So there's another book that came out in the last 5 years called Bowling Alone that speaks to this issue, which is where we had lots of associations and places that people build community. And the book that John is referring to really was all about how we build community through having our shared interests and our small groups, and how much that enriches our lives, right? So, those of you that are on Facebook, or those of you that are on LinkedIn or any of these sites and networks, people are in their little pods. They are communicating on social issues and on things that are meaningful to them. We're also raising a ton of money. How many of these little kids are raising a lot of money online? It's absolutely phenomenal how the internet has allowed some people to really continue to do what we've always done. At the same time, my view is that it's a lot harder because there are fewer people who are volunteering, and the ones that are volunteering are putting in more time. And so what we have is a need for greater incentive. But we also have things like, look at how many unemployed. I mean, there's some shocking statistics. Something like, I know this can't be an accurate figure, it just shocked me to death. 45% of young men under the age of 33 are living at home with their families. Okay, now that's because it's so expensive. Right now in San Francisco, I can understand that, or some places where, New York or some of these places where it's just phenomenal. But it's like, are we getting those kids out and saying, like I'm rather radical on this point, it's great that, your son gets to stay home and watch big screen television and, doesn't have to work and does all these things, but he's 28, he's never had a job. Can you knock him out of the nest a little bit and give him a little more incentive, or, something? And I think that my concern is that particularly affluent Americans and those who grew up, in some cases, working class and struggled, now coddle our kids because we don't want them to have that experience that we had. And what's happening is that next generation isn't getting sometimes that same message. However, a lot of their high schools required them to do 50 hours of service before they could graduate. And the average American volunteers, or over 100, about 200 hours. So I went to all the high school principals in the country about 5 years ago and said, you guys, up that 50 hours to at least 100 hours, and maybe we have a chance at getting them tracked for doing more. So my view is that there's an upside to the kind of what appears to be a different kind of activism. And I will say to you, I'm Bowling Alone, which was all about how people are, not in these associations and not going out as much. I think it's mixed. I think people are pretty overwhelmed. They're working 60-hour weeks, and so we do have a decline in a lot of people that are, that are in businesses. At the same time, there's deep concern by some of those corporations who are saying our employee giving and our employee volunteerism has got to increase because we can see we're working them too hard and we don't give them much time when they get home. So I think we're in a transition. We're in the intergenerational transfer of wealth time. Our generation's holding on to our money longer because we're living longer, so that next generation's kind of they don't think they're going to inherit by the time we live on and live on. My stepfather's 97, continuing to live, hanging on forever, and I think the whole thing of what that creates is some insecurity, enormous insecurity in that next generation, that they're not going to get that sort of little bit of advantage that they might. On the other hand, we're also seeing a redistribution of wealth and redistribution of age. We have a whole new generation that's coming in to lead these nonprofits, and how conscious are we at being able to encourage those nonprofits to actually, if you've been on the board of something for 25 years and you leave, or you're involved in an organization and you leave, how consciously are we leaving those organizations? So I think it's a very important time as we think about the redistribution of wealth and the intergenerational transfer of leadership in our organizations, that we attend to those transitions really, really carefully. And that's something that I mentor a lot of young people in how to do fundraising. For 25 years, I've mentored women of color in how to do fundraising. So get in there and redesign, be part of the redesign thing, because the structures as we have them are not really working in a lot of ways, and I think we need to be architects of the future and participate intergenerationally. What would it mean if at the next session like this, we each brought, this program I think goes only through February, which is fantastic, but if you have kids that are coming to visit you, get them to this series. We want to bring, or you have younger friends, or you have friends of color, or you have friends who are, who are different than you are in all kinds of ways. The important thing is to bring, let's mix it up. Let's bring more people in so we can expand this conversation. We don't mind standing room only in this room at all, right? Let's take one or two more questions and then we'll go to our next piece here. Thank you. Anybody have another question? A point you'd like to make to me or anyone else?
I have a hypothetical. I'm sorry.
Here we go. We're going to get her over here because I think these are tapes, sir. So if you don't mind, can you get over here? Let's see here.
I don't need that.
Yeah, I think for the sake of the taping, they probably do.
I have a hypothetical
Thank you.
question that I would just like to ask you.
Sure. What's
I'm
your name,
a
sir?
snowbird from Pennsylvania.
Okay.
I sit on several community foundations.
Yes?
I'm very good friends with a family.
Mm-hmm.
3 individuals between 85 and 100 years old. No heirs.
Mm-hmm.
I have an idea in our rural community that I want to build a new YMCA.
It's a great idea.
How would you suggest, and these 3 individuals are friends of mine, 2 sisters and a brother, how would you suggest from your experience that I should approach these individuals?
Everybody knows what I'm going to say. Tell me your first name, sir.
Paul.
Paul. No. You are a very bold guy who knows exactly what to say. So what's holding you back is the more interesting question. It's like, hey, if you need to engage them as co-designers. You have a dream. You've noticed that they don't have kids. This is something you see is really needed. Would they like to be part of it? And it's like, hey, it's an invitation to do something fun and great during their lifetime. So let me give you an example. The woman who, Mrs. Kroc, everybody eats McDonald's, right? So Mrs. Kroc was a client of mine, and one of the things that she had many, many people who helped her with her philanthropy, but one of the things that she said was, I'm going to die, and I have this desire to have, I know something is needed. I can see it, because I go out to these homeless organizations, and then I go out to some other thing, and there's no integrated services for homeless people. They need a place where they can get shelter, a bath, haircut, clothes, job, mental health services, some discussion about money and money management where they can learn, some stability, and then help with jobs, and actually not short-term housing, they need housing for a year or two. And I said, well, Mrs. Kroc, why don't you create it during your lifetime? And let's have 2 or 3 models where you can actually try it out. Try it out with Salvation Army, try it out with 2 or 3 organizations if you want to. And then before you die, let's figure out which one seems to be doing the best. Okay, so if you involve them with great excitement about your dream and say, we need to do a little feasibility study to make sure that my best guess is right, would you be willing to, that might take $10,000 or $25,000 to do it, but we could participate in that during your lifetime. And would you be willing to do that? Now, if you want me to come with you to that meeting, you call me up and I'll be there. I'm just telling you, it's like, but you don't need me. You need some youth who are convincing to them. You need inner city or rural youth who say, we don't have any opportunity and this place would be great. I can send you, actually, I have one donor who didn't have kids who set up created a building in Wisconsin, in rural Wisconsin, that was a youth center. It wasn't a YWCA, but I can send you pictures. I mean, I think if you have the picture or you have somebody else who did it, who said, here's what this person did, and she spent, I don't know how much money they have, but it's like, go for it. I don't know what's holding you back. Write up the concept paper.
It's driving me crazy because I want to do it.
What's your fear? They're going to say no?
I'm not sure.
It's death. It's talking about death with people. It's like, instead of talking death, talk about, I have this dream.
You hit the nail on the head because I want them to see it happen before they pass.
That's right.
So I want to see it. I want to see it happen.
Yeah. So you need to say, I'm so excited to think about this. I mean, do you know how much, are you an advisor so you know how much money they have?
Yes.
All right. So, hey, I have the inside scoop on how much money you all have. I have a great thing we could really make happen. We could make it all happen together. And I want to be the person that manifests this whether you're alive or not. I have that commitment.
They go to the same church I do and they sit right in front of me, and that's when I've been having in my head after church, I'm going to approach them.
Right. Well, you may be sure other people have that same dream in mind for them. So I think the whole thing of your church does too. So the whole thing of making sure they have a legacy plan where something goes to their church, and oh, by the way, this other 5 million or 10 million could do this other thing. So you want to call me on the phone? I'll brainstorm with you, but I want you to like not hold back now. You call me up now. All right. Don't hold back. This is like, go for it. You TikTok. What do we give him? A month. You got to plan this. And a month from now, what's the date? January 11th or something? What is it?
February 12th.
February. By Valentine's Day, we want to hear the report. Right by the end of this thing, we want to hear. Okay. So I want to be respectful of my time here. I got to look up here. I've got another 2-3 questions max. Okay. Then at 20 over, we're going to take. Go ahead.
I already have the power, I think.
Yeah. Want to say your name?
Yeah, Len Goldberg, local Sarasota guy, originally from New Jersey.
Great.
I wish I was from rural Pennsylvania because I'd help you build your YMCA because it sounds like a great thing to do. To pick your brain, 2 things.
Sure.
One, I know I overly focus on expenses when I'm looking at charities to give to. Can you give me and all of us some metrics or other things you look at as far as the efficacy of organizations that you give to? And the second thing is I'm always looking for ways to leverage giving. And if you could give us some insight into some of the more interesting ways you've seen that happen.
Sure. 2 really good questions. Say your first name, please.
Len.
Len. Okay, great. So some of you are in the business of doing evaluations, and some of you just give spontaneously. So here's the deal. There are places that rank nonprofits. There are 5 or 6 different indices, and the Better Business Bureau and all these others. The bigger nonprofits pay more to actually be listed at a higher level. So they're not, oftentimes what happens is that you see some of the bigger nonprofits who have the staff and who have the money to be able to pay $1,000 or $500 or $2,000 to be part of those evaluations. Okay? So that's not always fair, right? It means you're funding sometimes the biggest ones because you're hearing about them. Okay, every nonprofit, with the exception of churches and some that are associations, are required to file a tax return every year. It's called a 990. Okay? Those are available on guidestar.com, GUIDE, star, S-T-A-R, all one word, .com. It might be guidestar.org. It's a .org, forgive me. So you have to register, which means they get your email. They don't take your address, I don't think. You just register, they just want to know, and you have to create a password. Such a pain in the neck, these password things, right? And then you can go on and you can see the tax return, and you can go up and you can put the name now of any charity in, and it'll take you to the page of the charity. And each charity has a number that's called an EIN number, which stands for their Employment Identification Number. And every year they're required to file these things. The problem is there's not a systematic accounting method. And so once you look on the GuideStar thing, you can click on it, or you can ask the organization if they'll send you their 990. For those of you that are giving gifts of $2,500 or more, I suggest you do look. But if you're giving under $2,500, frankly, have a little faith. A little faith and trust goes a long way. I frankly think, unless you love doing research, it's like, it's probably, if something's been around a long time, you can make a phone call and ask a few questions if you want to, or have somebody else call on your behalf. Is your board stable? How long has your executive director been there? How'd you do on your budget last year? There's questions in the book that have to do with a site visit or questions you can ask. And I feel like a 10-minute phone call or 20-minute phone call can sometimes, that's what a philanthropic advisor does. They go and make those calls for you, and they look at the 990s and make sure, kick the tires, make sure they're doing okay. What do you need? How healthy is your, on a scale of 1 to 5, rate your organization. The problem is, even with the 990, you're, for the most part, doing your own evaluation of how you're doing, right? So it says how much the CEO is being paid. It says how much is spent on expenses. It says the income sources, for the most part, the top 5 or 10 givers. Doesn't necessarily have them by name. But you can get it in a 10-minute read once, and I'm happy to do a session for any of you on how do you read a 990. Okay, so here's the beneath the surface. I go see projects that I really want to get involved with them, because I think you learn much more from doing that. The numbers are an important piece of it, because if they're not keeping good books, they have a weakness, right? But it's more interesting how the pot of groups, for instance, if you care about libraries and literacy, or you care about immigrants and refugees who come to Florida who need help, that's an area of your giving. You're giving a quarter, Then to look at who the comparable organizations are, sort of the pod or the sector of those organizations, it would be like investing in the stock market. If I'm going to invest and I have the choice of having some of the things I invest in be a sector, say a sector like the internet, like companies that have to do with the internet, then I'm going to compare the groups in that sector and how they're doing, their strengths and their weaknesses. And I think too often we don't do that. We don't think there are 3 breast cancer organizations in this area. How do I compare them and how do I look at them? A lot of times that's an oral tradition. Are you involved with that breast cancer organization? Can you tell me why you think it's better than this one? So I think that as far as the administrative expenses, here's the rule of thumb. In general, you want organizations, for every dollar you give them, you want them to actually give away and return to the community at least 60 to 75 cents on the dollar. 60 to 75 cents of every dollar should be going back to the community. Unfortunately, it costs. So the bigger the organizations are, some of them are going to have up to 80 cents of every dollar, because they have a lot of money coming in, and then their expenses are less. To do fundraising costs money. To run an operation costs money. So 10% oftentimes in administration, 10 cents out of that dollar, 15% in fundraising. Now, let's just be kind about fundraising. It makes you all mad. Let me explain something. If you don't go to events, and you don't respond to email, and you do not respond to mail that comes, and you do not respond to people coming to your house, and you don't like it when people ask you to go out to lunch to hear about a nonprofit, you are wasting people's time. You need to be saying, I'm not a giver. I actually don't give. I volunteer, but I don't give. Because what happens is there is a lot of waste. People don't respond. They don't say that they're not giving to an organization. So the best thing you can do is tell an organization now, if a year from now you're not going to continue giving to them. Say, this is the last year. I've loved supporting you all for the last 10 years. I'm actually moving on to some different issues. This is my last donation. I'm more than happy to put on one lunch with one other person for you in the next 6 months on my time frame, not yours. that would actually let you know of another person who might get interested in your organization. But that will be my final commitment to you. I've loved being part of you. This is not a reversible decision. Get very clear with them that you're moving on. That is called a conscious transition. You're trying to help them. You're not just leaving them in the dark. You're letting them know they don't have to waste money fundraising from you, right? So I think this thing of how do we save organizations money? We get them to take them off our mailing list. That's hard to do. We can do things to reduce the cost of fundraising. And I do want to say that, you know, by and large, I would say 80% of nonprofits actually are working really hard to keep their expenses low. And they're very conscious about it. 20% are like 20% of all businesses. They overspend, and many times they're not going to make it. You know, they're not as conscious. If you're on those boards, you can really help them. Now, you had another piece of your question.
The other question was interesting ways to leverage.
Yeah. Thank you. So leveraging to me is also about, okay, timing, all right? So sometimes I have a moment of opportunity where it's really clear, and a great time is in October, okay? So let's say that I've been could be $1,000 donor to an organization, and I hear in October that they have $15,000 left to raise for the year. A lot of times in October they have way more than $15,000 left to raise, but what I decide is I want to see other $1,000 donors. So I'm going to give my $1,000, but I'm also going to say I'd like to give an additional $1,000 that's a matching gift, and I want that gift to match, you know, people who give $500. Now, we hear about this on public radio and television all the time, those matching incentive things, and you know what? People respond to them, right? You don't even have to get a cup or a bag, you know? And so I think that whole thing of creating a matching gift early on is a great way to leverage. Or you say to your friends, I'm going to have a lunch. I've been giving $500 or $250 to this organization. I would like to create a $2,500 gift between us all. And you know, you just call it the lunch bunch, and everybody comes and you share whatever it is. You can leverage by speaking up to your friends and saying, or our family, I'd like us to make a collective gift. So the whole thing of leveraging is about having the confidence and the power to say, this is important to me, and I'm looking for other people to chip in. Now, the great thing online is that there are all kinds of ways to make that happen now. You can be part of a walkathon and this or that, get sponsors. You can create your own web page. Like I did something once where I was working with this organization, and they were, I meditate because I'm such an outgoing person. I have to have some stillness at some point, right? So I replenish by, you know, having moments of silence every day. It's not so much a religious thing as it is sort of a, you know, clean your desktop and just have a little silence to let more things in and to just enjoy life. And what happened was that I decided that I would do a meditation online thing where we, at Christmas time or holiday time, you know, a couple weeks before Hanukkah and Kwanzaa and Christmas, we had one-day meditation-a-thon. And we started with 50 people who were just going to have a day of silence. And we all got sponsors, and we went up to our Facebook page and we said, you're not going to believe this, but in the busiest season of the year, we're going to be meditating. Well, you all are running around being crazy. We're going to just hold silence and peace for, you know, that day. And anybody who doesn't believe we're going to do it, you know, or who wants to encourage us, send in a little money. Well, we made $100,000 for this organization just by, you know, people giving 10s and 25s and 50s and $100. And the next year, $250,000, and the next year, $500,000. So I'm just saying sometimes you can come up with a great idea that really leverages. And so one of the things that's going to be really fun about this series is Harry and Sheila, I want you all to have an idea board the next time. And that we have Post-its that are handed out. And when you have a creative idea for the community, we actually begin to post them, or we have a Facebook page or something where people go on, you start to put your ideas for the community. Because you know what, we can jump on and help each other. So leveraging is about having the power of saying what you dream for. Maybe it came from you, maybe it came from some other source, and inviting other people to participate with you so that it accelerates that idea taking place and happening. What we need to not only come up with new ideas, we need to go to the existing nonprofit leaders and community leaders and say, what do you need? I have this idea, would this work for you? Do you need this? Because if they help design it with us, it's apt to actually be better for the community. We need to ask them what they need. I think that is our final question for the day, and I want to just say I'm really honored because Kelly and I get to do a really fun thing next. And Kelly, I'll leave it to you, and I just want to thank everybody for your participation. Thank you.
can't encourage you enough to take the time to read Tracy's book, because everything she talked about, all of the charts, all of the exercises are within her book. She also goes further into how to give, the differences between different kinds of foundations, really will give you the basis of all the things you need about how to give. When each of you registered for this class, you were asked to vote for 5 nonprofits that you'd like to see receive a $5,000 grant from the Leopold Institute for Philanthropic Studies at the Community Foundation of Sarasota County. Harry, you got to make it smaller, honey. That's a long word. And I am so excited that Tracy and I are going to give the first of the 5 checks today. The first one is going to Meals on Wheels. And accepting for Meals on Wheels is Alan Sprint's board president.
Thank you. Congratulations on the great work that you do everywhere. Wonderful. Yay.
The real thing.
Would you like to say
Oh. Tess is the secretary of our board, and she enjoyed your presentation today. And I enjoy Tess's presentation with me often. She's really a great gal. We have a brand problem. Meals on Wheels is known by virtually everyone, but people don't know about Meals on Wheels, and they don't know what Meals on Wheels really is or how they function. The check that you presented us today is part of the lifeblood of Meals on Wheels. Meals on Wheels of Sarasota started 30 years ago by 3 churches in Sarasota. Church of the Redeemer, St. Martha's Catholic, and First Methodist Unitarian. And that was a time when divergent groups didn't always get along, but these 3 groups got together and decided there was a need in the community. Within a year, they put together 100 volunteers. 50 of the volunteers were drivers, 20 of the volunteers were support staff, and 30 people worked in the kitchen. They originally started with putting meals together in St. Martha's Church, and the idea was to provide meals to homebound people. Most people think of Meals on Wheels as a quasi-government organization, and you provide meals to persons who are in poverty. That can't be further from the truth as to what it really is. Meals on Wheels organization is a holding company organization where each individual Meals on Wheels is an entity unto themselves. So Meals on Wheels Manatee, and Meals on Wheels Sarasota, and Meals on Wheels Venice, and Englewood were all separate organizations. We talk to each other, we share, but we're separate organizations. Our funding is separate. Some Meals on Wheels organizations receive funding through the Older Americans Act, where people over 60 and fall within an income level, their meals are covered partially by the government. Meals on Wheels Sarasota does not participate in the Older Americans Act. The only funding Meals on Wheels Sarasota receives is funding that comes from the clients who will donate to cover their meals. The largest part comes from contributions by individuals, contributions through bequests, people who feel good about the moment, people who want to give back to the community. These are the people who support Meals on Wheels. The people who receive meals in Sarasota County through Meals on Wheels, only about 30% of those persons pay anything. In Sarasota, we serve about 15% of the need in Sarasota County. We're serving 550 meals a day, 6 days a week. Over the last 30 years, we provided approximately 2.5 million meals. An enormous undertaking, and we're only just touching the surface. We're very dissatisfied with the fact that we're only touching 15% of the population, and the 77% of the clients that we serve are older women, people who are in their upper 70s and above, and live on Social Security, and that's their only income. It's a terrible situation when you consider that these people are paying their rent and their food or their gas and their electric on $800 a month. Our total budget is $350,000 a year.
So $5,000 is a big
$5,000 is a tremendous amount that will serve the population of this county.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
First of all, I'd like to make sure you fill out your name tag. It actually says on here, what is your philanthropic passion? So please fill that out before you go over to the cocktail party. Great conversation starter, but you're also going to have to hold it up high so people aren't looking at your navel. This concludes our first session of Joy of Giving series. Join us in 2 weeks, January 26th. So remember, there is not a session next Monday. It's going to be right here in Selby Auditorium when Bill Church, executive editor of the Herald Tribune Media Group, will discuss philanthropy right here in Sarasota, Manatee. Please join us now at the Powell Crosley Mansion. It is located just directly on the bayfront, adjacent to where we are now. It is a little bit of a walk. Parking is limited, so if you can carpool over there, great. If you can walk, better yet. And we hope to see all of you there. Thank you very much. You've been a great audience.
I'm going to be autographing books out front if anyone needs them. And I put my glasses down, so if someone finds my glasses, then I can truly see them.